So I invited Richard Harmon here, who is a dear friend of mine for well over a decade. He is brilliant. He's built companies. He's sold companies. He's an expert in ESOPs. And he's my go-to, just so you guys know. And I want to ask him some questions today, and I'm going to have him give his little deeper intro. I'm going to ask him questions, not just about ESOPs, but about exiting, where people are, where business owners are sabotaging themselves, because he knows, me and him, I still tell him, I think I should have did an ESOP on that. I was solving some things. He knows that. But I am planning in my future to do an ESOP, and he's my guy that's going to do it. And he's been on the top stages in the world, recognized by the top people in the world as the guy that does this stuff. And he has an incredible smart partner that I should get on here too someday. So without any further delay here, hey, Richard, super nice to see you. Good morning. Tell everybody first, where are you living today?
I'm in Puerto Rico. We'd show you outside. I could probably share a picture. It's just stunning. I live on this lagoon. Moved to Puerto Rico at the end of 2019. It's a story, but we've been down here for 4 years, and it's a U.S. tax haven. It's one of the only two places in the world that you can legally pay less than the full IRS 37% rates. And I got down here because of a client who wanted to do an ESOP, but for a lot of reasons didn't make any different. It make sense for him. And I said, what about, he said, what about Puerto Rico? And I'm like, what about it? He goes, well, I've heard these things. So we did a tremendous amount of research, helped him move down here. And then I said to the team, I said, what about me? They said, oh, it's perfect for you. Any ESOP I do sitting in Puerto Rico for my US clients gets taxed at 4%, not, 37%. So you basically keep about 96 cents on the dollar. But you have to put up with infrastructure issues, potholes in the sidewalks, things like that. But it's also stunning and beautiful. And 2 miles out, you see the cruise ships come in every day. And it's been wonderful.
And I bet you have a lot of friends and people there too, because a lot of people have moved there in the last 5-7 years, right?
Correct. There's a big community of folks that have moved down. It's a Bitcoin haven because there's no capital gains taxes, right? There's also mass tort attorneys. We know this attorney that does all the opioid cases. He moved 80 attorneys to Puerto Rico so that everything's done from here, because they get these massive settlements, and then most of the money comes here, their share. And then also hedge funds, investment firms, things like that, also attracted by the lack of capital gains. So they have this act, it's called Act 60. It used to be Act 2022. It's been in place since 2012, and it goes through 2035 unless they extend it. So the goal was Puerto Rico, for example, during Maria, a big hurricane hit in 2017, population on the island was 3.5 million, 500,000 moved to the States. There's 8.5 million Puerto Ricans. Every Puerto Rican since way before World War II is a U.S. citizen at birth. And a buddy of mine, matter of fact, right through the wall behind me, the only neighbor I'm connected to in our condo, he says, Richard, he goes, every Puerto Rican with skills can earn 25, 30% more by spending $400 on a plane ticket. And so a lot of them have. So anyway, that's my Puerto Rican story. But we have so many friends down here. It's surprising. We used to live in New York City. We have more friends in Puerto Rico than we did in New York City, probably double or triple. Everybody they move down here. They don't have friends. They make friends,
Yeah. So I want to dig more into this. Type in, do some of you a little more curious to dig a little deeper in the Puerto Rico, like living out there? I got to dig a little deeper in that, but give everybody your 2-minute background, who you are, what you've done, what you do today.
So, initially I was a financial guy, financial systems gun, CPA. I've been a CPA for 4 decades. I'm dating myself. Built a large technology staffing business in the 90s, grew it from 0 to 30 offices in 3 years, sold it to a company, went public. Did all this with my business partner and best friend, Morty Levine, who Mike was referring to a few moments ago. We started over a dozen businesses, close to 24 businesses after that. None of them had the same size and scope as that initial one, but we had multiple exits. And one of our companies was a company called Back Office Support, and I would do traveling CFO, bookkeeping, accounting services for companies with 50 million and under revenues. And I would just deploy financial professionals. In the Great Recession, my revenues were dropping. They dropped like 70%. I'm like, I better, sharpen my pencil and dust off my CPA certificate. I took one of my own assignments, which was as the CFO of a $50 million ESOP-owned manufacturing company in New York. And as part of that work, I ended up meeting this company, CSG Partners, who's kind of the nation's leading ESOP investment bank. And they inspired me to become a managing director, which I did in 2011. So since then, I've been going all over the country, inspiring owners to sell part or all their companies to their employees versus private equity. I lost the battle with Mike. He had a good private equity deal on the table before the pandemic. It went away. He called me. And then at the end of the first year of the pandemic, he called me back and he goes, "Oh, they came back. I sold." I said, "Congratulations." I love what ESOPs do. They allow an owner to get liquidity, diversification, take money off the table, defer their capital gains, still govern the company. The entire transaction is deductible, so there's tax efficiencies both to the selling shareholders, to the company, also for the employees, and it's a win-win. So I've done several dozen of these transactions, over $2 billion at this point, anywhere from $7.5 million to the largest one was $500 million that the owners have taken off the table. And so that's my passion. My passion is owners create this equity, and if they don't harvest it along the way, we have so many baby boomer business owners retiring right now. It's the rate of like 10,000 a day, which is, for you guys, this is your opportunity to pick up those businesses, right? To scoop them up, because when you achieve size and mass, and most of our companies were bootstrapped from scratch. We had a Medicare asthma pharmacy. We bet 20,000 in marketing, and we got 60,000 of orders, and we grew it to a couple thousand, then sold it for $3 million a couple of years later. But it was bootstrapped. The company that bought us, they were buying 20 of us a year, the wealth that they were creating. So when you're really small, the value is small. But as you get, and the quickest way to grow sometimes is to merge, to acquire, versus just slugging it out, which has been my background, right? It's just slugging it out, from ground zero versus a growing by acquisition. So in the space that I'm pretty sure a lot of the Food Dog members are in, look for that low-hanging fruit. You've got that 73-year-old who's kind of done, or the 60, whoever it is, because if they die in the saddle, it's just not good for their family. It's not good for their employees. It just destroys wealth. And then once you get a certain size and mass, ESOPs are fantastic to consider. I have so many situations where the owner's been able to get liquidity and diversification, so they've got safe money outside of the business. They don't have all their net worth tied up in the business. They create this benefit for their team, and then later on, if they end up selling to a third party, the team, which normally has to wait till retirement milestones, start at 55, some at 60 and 65 and so forth. If they sell before that, the employees get money into their 401k, and it's just this love letter, But I have some heartbreaks along the way. Mike was one. I had one that I was trying to talk an owner who had a private equity deal going on. Mike knows the drill. When you're a self-made entrepreneur and you sell your company and you're still running your company, well, they're going to want you to become their employee. And now you're stuck working with somebody for a while, and psychologically, it's no fun. You get a big check, but now you're just kind of a high-paid employee, right? So for a while, right? I don't know. I could go on and on about all these little attributes.
Richard, so first off, let me make sure all of you know. So in ESOP, if you were to summarize it, because there's 3 parts I love, so I want you to go deeper on the 3 parts. Part number one, guys, is you get to keep, own it, and take money off the table for yourself. I love that. I love that. So I want you to talk about that. Part number two, what happens in how fast companies scale when the owners actually own and have skin in the game? And then number three, can I still, after I take all money off the table, can I still sell it and get more? So talk to those three.
Great. So, and if you don't mind, let me just, I'm just going to tee it up if it works out, to share one slide.
Yeah.
One slide. Which I will do in a moment. But okay, hit me with the three questions again. The first one is
taking money off the table. Tell us,
right?
How much because my rule of thumb, I think you said before, was like 10 full-time employees and 10 million or more is a good spot. Tell me what it is.
Right. So our sweet spot, you can do an ESOP at any size. It'll scale down to nothing. But once you do an ESOP, you've got $40,000 to $60,000 of annual expenses to maintain it. So if you're making a couple $100,000 a year, it makes no sense. And then when your employees get their statements, there's no value, so it's not interesting for them. So, I always say, sell the trees, don't sell the saplings. Sell the crop, not the seeds. If you fought your way up to $1 million in revenue, it was much harder to go from 0 to that than that to 5, and from 5 to 10. There's a scale. There's you just figure out things and you can accelerate and you can gain mass. And while you're doing that, you're creating value. So the sweet spot that we see that I like is 3 to 5 million in profits. You need to be over 10 million in revenue, because then we can get banks to finance the transaction. And when banks finance the transaction, we were able to raise money with no personal guarantees. Company borrows the money. You get that money. You get to reinvest that money. And you get to repay the bank with pre-tax instead of after-tax dollars. Normally, you borrow money, you have to pay principal with after-tax. So it's this gift the ESOP gives from tax dollars to be able to pay down debt about twice as fast. It's not as burdensome because you've got all this extra cash flow after tax. So why that 3 to 5 million? Because typically companies are worth 6 to 8 times. Sometimes it's 5 times. Sometimes it's 12 times. Some companies are worth 20 times revenues. Real outliers like YouTube, right? When it was bought by Google, now Alphabet. But in that 3 to 5 range, you've created somewhere between 18 and $40 million of equity. I could sell half your company for 10 to $20 million, 49%. You still own 51%. You get 10 to 20 million off the table. You get to reinvest it all. You've still got 51% of the upside, and your employers are sharing in a stake of 10 to 20 million dollars in equity and growing. And so it's just, that's my sweet spot. Also, you don't feel the annual fees. You have to pay this independent, in our case, institutional trustee. You have to pay for an annual valuation each year because your employees get a statement that tells them what their shares are worth. So you have to do an annual valuation, and you have to pay for a firm that creates those statements for your employees. And so they get a statement once a year. Here's how many shares you're allocated. Here's how many shares you're vested, and here's the value per share. If you want me to take 3 minutes and go through an ESOP overview, I've got one slide I'll share with 6 elements that covers the whole thing. But we can keep going through your questions.
Hang on one second. I definitely want you to do that, but you're triggering thoughts for me. So what about if I do an ESOP? When it's time to do that, do they need to be employees? Can 1099 people get an incentive and build it in that? How does that work?
So there's a couple of issues. They need to be full-time equivalent employees. What's that? It's called an FTE. You work 1,000 hours a year, which is typically 20 hours a week, and you're still employed the last day of the year, and you need to get a W-2. So if you get a 1099, once I had a real estate group, they had 100 1099s and no employees. They converted 20 to becoming employees with minimum wage, basically, but they, with bonuses, still got up to their other levels of salary. People like 1099s because you're not paying employer payroll taxes, on the 1099 folks. The 1099er is responsible for paying all their FICA taxes and the like. So you can convert employees, but the way ESOPs work, and by the way, Monday, Labor Day, was the 50th anniversary of President Ford signing ESOP legislation in the Oval Office.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? It was 50 years ago in 1974. I was in high school. Isn't that wild? I was just graduating high school. Nixon had just resigned. It's quite a long time ago. So yeah, that's the scoop. So
yeah.
Next question.
The next thing is, which is the part that I feel most people are missing today, is when you do an ESOP, you create employee ownership mentality. Can you talk on how that helps a company scale?
I've got a great example. Matter of fact, we're doing an interview with this company, TechFlow, in a couple of weeks, and he has a company that provides governmental contracting services. And just one last thought. I should have ended the last section on saying, legislatively, you need to have 10 full-time equivalent employees to do a partial ESOP and 12 to do 100% ESOP. We like to see about 20 employees, but you can do it with 10. Typically, we won't have you become 100% ESOP right away, but I won't get into the weeds on that. All right. So, okay, take me back to this, the next element. Just give me what was the second part of your question?
The ownership, like how do the employees, now they have skin in the game. What have you noticed with companies?
So, and I was getting back to that government contractor, right? That's going to come up. So they had been in business 15 years by 2015. And they had grown to 60 million in revenue. And they were starting to fade. And they had drawn from 60 million back to 50 million. He didn't have employee engagement. He said, well, let's explore this ESOP. So we did an ESOP for him 10 years ago. And he got everybody pulling the same direction. Look, we're owners. You've got a piece of the game. You've got a stake. Each year that you work, you're going to get allocated more shares based on your relative W-2 salaries compared to everybody else. And those shares are going to have value over time. And I got to pre-interview the owner a couple of weeks ago. And he goes, Richard, now we're at $300 million a year in revenue. We're just crushing it. The employees are happy. Pretty much every one of them is going to retire, or with more than $1 million in their ESOP accounts, where they get that money into their 401k when they hit retirement milestones. So we see it happen all the time. I think there's been some wonderful stories. I had somebody who had an insurance agency who came up to me 6 months ago, and he said, Richard, I took money off with the ESOP, back in 2016, 2017. We sold the company in 2022. The employees got paid out. I had this a woman who was my receptionist, who'd been with me for 15 years. She was 58 years old. She didn't have any retirement savings per se, but she had the ESOP side. Well, when we sold, she got 1.6 million into her retirement account. She makes $80,000 a year. She was in tears. Her husband was in tears. He was the most impactful event for him, other than like the birth of one of his grandchildren. And so it was just a win-win-win. It just really aligns interest. I did an interview with somebody early in the year who went through history talking about all the folks, occupants of the Oval Office, that have supported employee ownership one way or another. Initially, Thomas Jefferson, it was land. Everybody should have at least be a small landowner, And then as we got to Teddy Roosevelt, it became companies. Even Andrew Carnegie and the Rockefellers, Rockefeller's famous trust buster, right? John Rockefeller initially, but he came around to employee ownership and the value of employee ownership later on. John F. Kennedy, Ford, Reagan was a huge proponent of employee ownership. And the idea is America's a capitalist society, right? Oh, I have this great quote. I'll see if I can find it really quickly. I'm not going to be able to find it really quickly.
You'll send it to me and I'll send it to everybody.
Well, we have this. We had done an article. Matter of fact, I can find it in a heartbeat. We had done an article. Let me just pull it up. It's just so fun to see. There it is.
Everybody, while he's looking for the article, type in the chat bar, what is something you're getting pretty excited about right now? I would think a lot, because I'm writing on these little sticky notes and I have a whole bunch of stuff I'm writing here. And while he's looking for it, have any of you ever watched, Gary, did you ever watch the series Hell on Wheels by any chance? It's a series called Hell on Wheels, and it's about the railroad and stuff. And this guy, Bohannon, the minute they make him a stakeholder, it's a big deal. He wants this railroad now. It's exactly what he's saying. When you make your team stakeholders, I mean, as soon as we get to size, it's something we're working on. So those of you that are on here from our team, that's part of our goal. Make everybody stakeholder, because I don't want to be the only one up at night saying, how do we create more so we all win more? I want the whole team to have that same level of ownership. So back to you, Richard.
So there's this great quote. It's an article that's under my byline, but I kind of wrote the article. Then our chief marketing officer kind of rewrote the article, and then he sent it back to me, and I rewrote a couple of tweaks. So I feel like we both wrote it, but he found this great quote. So Louis Kelso was this guy in the 50s who pioneered ESOPs. He was an attorney, and he said, look, America is a capitalist society. And he wrote a book called The Capitalist Manifesto. It was literally a rejoinder to the Communist Manifesto, right? And later on, decades later, as ESOPs became law after 15 years of lobbying or so, he was being interviewed by Bill Moyers. I don't know if you remember Bill. He's a big journalist. He's retired now. But it was this Bill Moyers show called A World of Ideas 2, Public Opinions from Private Citizens. And this is what Kelso said, which I thought was explicit. The Roman arena was technically a level playing field, but on one side were the lions with all the weapons, and on the other, the Christians with all the blood. That's not a level playing field. That's a slaughter. Also, this is the crux. So putting people into the economy without equipping them with capital, while equipping a tiny handful of people with hundreds and thousands of times more than they can use, is a big problem. So this idea is, how do we create, Trump or Kamala? It's I don't care, but she's talking about how do you create a stronger middle class? Well, ESOPs are a great way to create a stronger middle class, because people who end up with a stake in their business end up with 4 to 5 times the retirement assets. And that's just the people with retirement assets. Half the people don't have any retirement assets. So that with them, it's an unlimited increase, right? So that's why I kind of became an ESOP evangelist. And as you mentioned, I get to speak on different stages. But the broader picture is I'm a fan of entrepreneurs. I started at Coopers and Lybrand in 1978, wet behind my years out of school. And I ended up becoming founder of the Emerging Services Business Group back then. And I got to work with all these entrepreneurs and all these startups, and I just loved it. And then over time, I got to become an entrepreneur and do all these startups. And now I get to spend time with all these owners. It's just so many businesses get created. It's so hard. Unless you're sitting in the seats you guys are all sitting in, you don't know how hard it is. If somebody's just, working a 9 to 5 at a marketing job or something like that and getting a paycheck, it's so difficult to properly balance all these variables to generate wealth. And it's just wonderful that when you do that, you can celebrate your team by sharing meaningful equity with them, and also get rewarded yourself, for all the hours and hard work and the 10,000 decisions you had to make on a yearly basis.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to ask a question, but I still want you to go through your one-page sheet, because every time I hear you talk about the structure of ESOP and the one-page sheet, it reinforces myself. So give us, if you were going to target baby boomers to help them, you were going to pick them up as a business with the sole intention to get them to an exit. Tell me how you would build the exit of a baby boomer with an ESOP to make sense for the baby boomer and someone like me that's building a lot of baby boomers in the portfolio?
So, I have a few of those right now, right? Where I've got a client, he's already, there's something magical happens that Mike knows about. When you sell 100% of your shares to an ESOP trust, you're still allowed to have synthetic equity, which is the warrants, stock appreciation rights, options. It's the right to buy back shares at a fixed price, set in a certain set of circumstances that makes that price low. What happens to the company at that point? It becomes tax-free in perpetuity. Think about if you have an S corp, you get a K1. Well, that K1 goes to the retirement trust. Retirement trust doesn't pay taxes. So once you get to this position, this type of ESOP, you're tax-free in perpetuity. And if you go acquire somebody, they become tax-free. Their employees get merged in. They become part of the ESOP, and you get to pay them off with their own pre-tax dollars. But there's a trick. So now I've got a client who's 100% ESOP right now, and they still have a 40% stake where they can buy back. So they're still getting upside appreciation. And they are acquiring a competitor. And the competitor is doesn't make any difference. It's smaller than they are, but the owner's 73, and he wants out. Well, we're going to structure it so that owner can do an ESOP, defer all his capital gains, and then merge right into the new company and then become tax-free. Because one of the big benefits that Congress put in place to inspire owners to sell shares to this trust for their employees is called a 1042 rollover, which is the opportunity to reinvest your proceeds over a year period of time and defer all your capital gains taxes. So we want to get that retiring owner the ability to get that paycheck, not have to pay capital gains taxes on it, which gives him a big boost. Because in most states, it's at least 20%, but in California, for example, it's 37.5% capital gains taxes. And they're only going up, right? At some point. So there's an art to that. It's not simple. We had a nice trucking company in New York. We did it for a few years ago. And I think we have an opportunity to do it as long as negotiations go well. But if you're going to go buy a company and that owner wants to retire, and there's a couple things going on. Typical acquisition, if it's a small company, you might just try to do an earnout. I've got a large home healthcare company right now. They do hospice, they do home healthcare. The payroll's $100 million. And I was talking with the COO. He goes, Richard, we did all these acquisitions. They've got, over 40 LLCs. He goes, sometimes it's just a small company. They can't make next payroll. We're able to take over the company for next payroll, put in best practices, and grow them. We got them for a song, right? And now they're selling them to an ESOP. Companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars because they've acquired all these companies at these minor amounts, but put in processes and to make them profitable, right, or more profitable. So the art of building an empire is not easy. And then you've got the owners. The problem with the owners are they're owners. They've been in the king seat, the queen seat for often decades, and they're giving up their baby. And it's owner psychology. It's like, how do you inspire them to take that move? I have another acquisition that a friend was working on, similar to the one I just mentioned. Really big company, owners in Chicago. He's 83. He's got dementia. He doesn't have the right succession strategy. Yet he's already at the point where he's not thinking clearly or rationally, right? And bad decisions make bad outcomes. So there's an art to doing those acquisitions. And Mike, I think in your world, given the size of a lot of the HVAC, plumbing, electrical services companies, what does private equity do? They love you once you're 5 million in profits. If you're an HVAC company, if you've got if you have diverse lines of services, you have you started plumbing, but maybe you tag in electrical and maybe some HVAC. and you've got 5 million in equity, some private equity firm is going to pay you a big multiple, might be 12, 15 times. If you're at $1 million, they're not going to pay you anything, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, what I have going on now with people in the HVAC space is, you know, I have somebody in North Carolina, and it's a sizable company, but he's growing really rapidly. And the private equity is knocking on his door saying, oh, we can get you 15x. And we're looking at the whole market. We're like, that's not happening. They're dangling a shiny lure. And by the time he got through the whole process, they're going to beat him up, you know, and he's going to end up down at a, you know, a smaller multiple. But these are, you know, the goal is, how do you create generational wealth for you and your family? And then, you know, and then you go to the outer circle, which are your employees. And your employees in a lot of companies, they become not just employees, but your chosen family, right? How do you build wealth that everyone can benefit from, right? So an ESOP is just part of that equation. But the typical blocking and tackling, everything you do, Mike, in terms of all the insights in the businesses that you built, and sharing those insights, and you know, it's important to have that information, but you gotta be able to execute, right?
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to, Michael has a question for you, which is great. I'm going to hand it over to him. You know my son, Michael. He's going to ask the question. He's going to let you then share your one-page sheet. Everybody, I'll be back in a minute. Jen's doing a 5-day training, 16 hours a day. I'm going to go put the chicken that came out of the oven in the fridge, or I'm going to get my ass kicked. So I'm going to go do that while Michael asks this question. And Richard, this question he's going to ask is really great, because this is a whole new way. So go ahead, Michael, take it away, and I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mike. Hey, Richard, great to see you again. So my question is, there's so many people doing roll-ups right now, right? Especially in service industries, they're buying 3 or 4 companies, but they're not putting them underneath an umbrella brand, right? They're all their own brands running in different states. How would you go about structuring an ESOP for either a roll-up? Is that possible? And what does that look like when you go into it, when you have 5 companies you want to roll up?
Yeah, you know, the challenge is, you know, I had somebody call me, it was in Florida, 2 owners of fantastic restaurants, both thriving, both, let's say, $1.5 million, $2 million in profits, right? So combined, now they're 3-4 million in profits. Nice ESOP. You've got 2 personalities, you know, 2 cultures, 2 brands where people love this one, they love that one. You know, we always like switching restaurants when we go out, and trying to get that together is a challenge. So I'll give you a playbook that a friend of mine in private equity uses, right? And it's made him so much money. He'll go in and he'll find, you know, he's looking for regional diversification and service line diversification. So these are larger kind of roll-ups, but it's a real example. He bought HVAC, plumbing, electrical services group in the Northwest. And that was the first anchor. And you know, he puts a holding company on top. He also puts the management up here, right? So after he buys these companies, they ease the owners out. The owners roll a piece of their equity into the mothership, but they become you know, directed by the mothership. So in this case, let's say, I'll pretend they were $1 million EBITDA, but they were bigger than that. They were 4 million EBITDA. So he paid 16 million 4 times, right? The owner had to roll 4 million of those 16 into the mothership. So they have to roll 4 million and get equity into the bigger thing, right? So they get a smaller piece of the bigger thing. Then he borrowed 8 million from banks using that company's own balance sheet to hand to the owner. And he put in 4 million of his own money. So now he's got 4 million of his own money in. He's got 12 million in cash that the owner got at closing, and that rollover. That was anchor number 1. Now he went and did that on the East Coast, and he found another one. And this one was a little bit bigger, 6 billion EBITDA, same thing, right? So now he's got 10 million of his own money invested, but now he's got 10 million of EBITDA. right? And he's got both coasts going on. And then he acquired another one in Texas. And this one was 8 million EBITDA, but they got the smallest piece of their rollover when they got, let's say, 32 million. With their rollover, because the other two were already in place, that already had massive value, they got a smaller piece of that mothership than the original company did. But that's just a relative number. So now between the three of them, initially it was really about 15 million in EBITDA between the three of them. Over 3 to 5 years, he grew them to 25 million EBITDA. Now, he had bought them all at 4 times, and now he sold them for $250 million, right? So remember, he only had 4 million on the first one. He had 6 million, 10 million cash, 8 million. He had 18 million of his own cash, and he turned his personal paycheck after paying off all the other owners and all the participants into over $100 million. And that's an actual example of a real roll-up that happened 2 years ago. So now if you take it smaller, right? I think one of the things he does is when he's doing those roll-ups, he does really deep background checks on all the owners. You know, once in a while he'll find somebody who's got a lot of stuff in the closet that you don't want to find out later, you know, how they, you know, defrauded prior partners, things like that. They do a deep background check. They also do due diligence. They do what's called a quality of earnings report. A lot of private equity firms do that. So what is a quality of earnings report? It's an accounting firm that does it, and they go in and they look at your earnings and they say, all things considered, how likely is this business going to be able to generate these earnings in the future? Are there dependencies on a huge client? What happens if they go away? Are there dependencies on supply chain? And they'll look at all these things. And if it has a good quality of earnings report, you know, et cetera. But I think the real money right now is to be made in, Michael, to your point, of those roll-ups of these smaller companies that are making $500,000, $1 million, 2 million. And I don't have the playbook to do that per se, but if you have a company and it's a $500,000 in EBITDA, it's not worth very much. You know, I don't know what you would think it would be worth in the HVAC space. Is it 2x profits? You know, what do you think, Michael?
I guess 2 to 4 right now with where the market's trending down from what I'm hearing from people.
Right. So the idea is if you can accumulate efficiently enough of these smaller operations, the 2 to 4x, it's still a real payday for folks, but it doesn't have the mass to command, right? The mass to command the multiples once you put these together is once you hit 5 million or more in equity. Now, a side story is once you get that mass in equity, now you got the CSOP option. You can get money off the table, you get liquidity diversification, but you can also sell to the bigger beast, right? Because you know, size and mass is strength, and how do you pull it off intelligently? You need the owners to take back a little bit of an earnout. You know, how do you finance that acquisition? If somebody's a $500,000 EBITDA, if it's $1 million to $2 million, maybe they're staying on. You need to have processes in place, the right team in place, the right leadership team in place that's running at that holding company. But you know, if you're doing things in multiple states, that's great. You're getting geographic diversity, which is one of the things that you get paid a premium for when you have geographic diversity, because they're trying to say, hey, we want a safe operation that's going to be able to generate income far into the future. And if I've got 3 lines of business, I've got electric, plumbing, and HVAC in Oregon. I've got something similar in North Carolina and Texas. Oh my gosh, I've got regional diversification. I've got companies that have been doing this for a while. And then comes branding. It's like, do you impose the predominant brand on the market, or do you continue with it depends on how loved the brand is, right? And whether it's generating real value in the local marketplace. But yeah, that's the challenge. It's like, you know, and then, you know, buying it versus building it is always so much quicker, right? You know, you do all the things, you know, we all do all the things that we should be doing for organic growth and momentum in our own companies to get market share and the like. But the quickest way to grow is through acquisition. And it does seem that at this point in time, given the massive numbers of owners who are retiring that there are deals to be had, and the ability to build your own empire, which is geographically diversified, revenue line diversification, and it creates wealth by the fact it is diversified by revenue and by geography, and then you have different ways to harvest that wealth. You can either, you can do this roll up, and then you get to size and you sell to private equity, or you can do that roll up and get to size and just use the earnings, or you could do an ESOP to get some liquidity and financial diversification, get some money off the table. But the key is, how do you build the empire? And it's not simple. It's so challenging because there's so many people that are out there, in the trenches, getting the work done. And I'm dealing with a few owners right now in the psychology. One guy's a good friend of mine, 63, 64, got a big HVAC company in New York, and then I have another one that's growing rapidly in North Carolina, started by his grandfather. Kind of skipped a generation. He's grown it into $60 million juggernaut. And it's like, when do you harvest? But these are, I call them, blessings of abundance, right? If you're able to put these things together and put the puzzle together, you're not worried about making the rent or the mortgage or, the car payment. You're escaping, financial gravity. So it's and that's what every entrepreneur is trying to do. But how do you do it? You have to deliver more value. Well, so many things are going on now, and so many things are being automated, but nobody's automating plumbing. Nobody's automating electric. These things need to be done by real people in real homes and real offices, and that's why there's a lot of resources that are circling them, right? Because anyway, so I know I'm just going on a bit, but
Richard, let me jump in here. Thank you, Michael. And so everybody knows the chicken is safe, so we're all safe now. We're good. The chicken's in the fridge. What about like other countries, like Canada? Is there a different type of ESOP? Is there a way to structure that?
Yeah, I can't imagine how many Canadians I've talked to over the years. I'm like, not so good. But guess what Canada did? They surprised me. January 1, they passed a law that for the next 2 years, the owner can sell shares to an employee ownership trust in Canada and not pay capital gains on the first $10 million. So they can get the first $10 million off the table, not pay capital gains. It only lasts for 2 years, and there's some tricks. It's not as elegant as it is in the U.S. U.S., you can sell part of the stake. You're still the board. You still govern the company. You still have all this upside. In Canada, you have to sell 51%, and the employees have to be involved in the board and ongoing management. They have to actually get control of the company. So in Canada, you're getting this opportunity to take money off the table, but your employees are truly getting at the seat of a table. Whereas in the U.S., the shares are always owned by the ESOP trust. The employees have an economic stake in those shares, but they're not on the board. I mean, besides the employees that are normally on the board, right? So that's what's going on in Canada. And the rest of the world doesn't work so well. It's pretty much just an entitlement benefit where it's an extra cost, but there's no carrot for the owner to do it. It's just, it's something else nice to do for the employees. It used to be in Canada that if you did an ESOP and you took money off the table, you sold shares, well, you had to pay capital gains taxes. Then when your employees received the money in retirement, they didn't have to pay tax on the first 500,000 Canadian. And I think that's still the case as well. But now the owners get a benefit. So in the US, we've kind of hit all those notes. And I know I don't know where we are on time today. I think we're coming up against the.
Are you good for another 15 minutes or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm going to rapid fire some stuff because I feel everybody's got a good gist of the ESOP. Tell all of us, these are all players, business owners. are business owners doing right now today that's just making you shake your head like this? Like, you want to shake that little toy and be like, stop doing that bullshit. What are you seeing that's just making you go, what the heck's going on here with everyone?
Well, again, everything has to do with size and scale, right? So when you're just starting out, you don't care about reviewed financial statements. You're busy just getting by and doing everything you can to minimize taxes to grow your business. The biggest frustration for me is people aren't prepared for an exit. That's what I focus on. I focus on exits. We've talked about ESOPs. It's a great way for an owner to retire, to transition the business, to get money out, to stay relevant as the next generation is taking over. But so many companies aren't prepared, right? So I had this great transaction. I won't go into details, but it was a sizable deal. We raised $100 million and they needed to be audited because banks like you to be audited when you're getting, sizable checks from them. And I thought, former auditor, it takes 4 to 6 months. We'll get audited. It was multiple operations in New York and New Jersey. Actually, we were just looking on the New Jersey side, and it took 2 years, right? They weren't prepared. This was 2018. Never happened. Financing went away. 2 years later, when they finally got their operations audited, guess what? They were making more money than they thought they were. They didn't have integrity of their financial statements, right? Well, now they did. And then private equity turned their heads and they said, oh, we'll sell you. Well, that's exciting. That didn't happen. 4 years they had somebody out shopping them. And so I just was talking with the owner just 2 months ago, and he goes, Richard, he goes, we're not doing anything now. These guys are, it's a very successful company. Obviously, we're selling part of it for $100 billion. So don't cry for the owners, but I hate seeing people not prepared. So, Mike, I'll share, we've got this 14 must-dos to maximize wealth when selling your business. And I can put it in the chat if you want, or I can, I'll put a link to it. I've also got a nice ESOP guide, that Morty and I wrote. So we've got all these marketing materials at CST about ESOPs. And he goes, too complicated. So we wrote a little ebook. It's probably 20 pages long to describe ESOPs. And if you want, I'll share this with you outside and you can post it to people later. But it's just a link to those free ebooks. And so, the big thing for me now, it's we're starting to work with a lot of owners who are planning to exit in 3 to 5 years and say, hey, do these things. Financial statements have integrity. Let's make sure you have customer diversification. If you don't have financial statements you can trust, they're going to immediately offer is going to be 20% less because they're paying you for your future cash flow. You want to be the owner, not the operator. Because if you're the operator, Mike, that was you. You were the front of the house, with your last company. You're the guy. They want the guy to stay. If you had another guy who was the guy and you were just showing up now and then, it might have been more palatable, right? Versus, so you want to become the true owner where you've got a team that's functioning without you, so that when you do sell, it's not taking all your time and attention, right? You get your life back. You get more freedom.
That's really good. And you know what? I want to share that, and you'll send me those links. I'll get it out to these guys. Especially like Kerry, for someone like you, like he just said something so magical there that, and I hear it all the time. People say, the bookkeeping companies, $4,000 a month, or the CPAs $5,000. I said, you think that's expensive? Let me tell you how expensive it will be when you go to sell your company and you lose a deal that's 20 million. That's expensive. What you're paying now is called preparation, but it's about what you say. You're planning for an exit. So, it's so key there. Let me ask you one more question. We'll finish with this one. If you were to tell everybody from your wisdom, and you got a hell of wisdom here, everybody give some love in the chat bar to Richard. Did he just give you he summarized on our questions, millions and millions of dollars. He made me millions and millions by supporting me. I didn't even send the guy a damn fruit basket. But I do help him when I can. I do help him when I can.
Mike, you've been wonderful. You helped us so much with our exit strategy concepts. Mike's a gun. Mike's a gun.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm thrilled by everything that you do.
Thank you. If you were to tell everybody, hey guys, no matter where you're at in the game of business, over the next 36 months, these are just a couple things you just really should focus on if you want to have future wins. What would be your wisdom to pay attention to over the next 36 months?
You want sustainable earnings, right? You want an engine that's generating sustainable earnings. You want to find a way to maintain momentum. Don't get complacent. If the company is growing and expanding, value is increasing. If it's decreasing, value is decreasing, and it's not necessarily linear. It's like, oh my gosh, the business is fading. Well, now you're destroying value. So you want marketing systems in place that are creating momentum. You want to be able to manage your operations in a way that you have quality of life. I know when we were starting our tech staffing businesses in the 90s, we were working close to around the clock between the two of us. We get about 4 hours sleep a night, and I'd start at 10 in the morning, go to 2, and Morty'd start at 6 a.m. and go to 10 at night. And there's a way to balance all that. And Mike, I know you're so good at providing details on that are actionable. But again, I come from this financial background. I like you having your financial systems having integrity. It doesn't mean to be audited or reviewed right away, but make sure that the numbers are right, that you understand your financial scorecard, that you understand the difference between a balance sheet and cash flow, because cash flow is so essential, and profits and cash flow, that's different. There's so many things that you need to be thinking about. I'm just going to look at one thing here. Hold on. Looking for one resource.
Yeah, and everybody type in the chat bar, what is something you're thinking about, an opportunity now that you were not thinking about before? Is it, because we'll talk about this at Venture Velocity, guys, on like, how do we stack companies? How do we build the portfolio of companies with $0? Now, how do you, an ESOP is some of my new thinking of what Michael asked, which was brilliant. It wasn't my question, it was his, is how do we now, Gary, how do you look for a company and say, look, I'm going to take 40% of your company. I'm not going to give you anything. I'm going to scale it to $10 million. We're going to get that, $3 million in profit. We're going to make sure we have the employees. We're going to exit in 3 to 5 years with an ESOP and then do it again. Like it's speed to exit, right? If you look at how long, that's what I wanted to do. The first deal took me 10 years to learn all that. The second deal was 5 years. It's about collapsing time where you could start in 18 months, partner, scale, grow, exit, boom, have a blast just doing it over and over again. Did you find what you're looking for, Richard?
Yeah, I think, Mike, I sent you a personal text with the links to those guides. Okay. I think those would be valuable to share with your team over time. Like right now in my world, I'm like, how do I reach these business owners? Yeah. How do you penetrate? How do you connect with all these business owners that are in my world, because they're the 3 to 5 million EBITDA, some are 20, some are 50 million EBITDA, 100 million sometimes. How do you connect to these folks that are so busy, that are running these empires, that are being bombarded every day by 1 million people trying to sell to people who have all the resources, right? Yeah. And that's a challenge. So you try these different marketing initiatives. I've been lucky to be able to influence influencers. Yesterday I was on the phone with an influencer that gets 40 million views a month, and coaches in software CEOs, right? And I'm like, and that's worked for me a little bit. But in your own space, it's like, how do you get connection to those owners so that they trust you and are willing to take action, so that they'll go forward with an acquisition, right? And then how do you expand their businesses with better processes that they've never thought about to put in place, where you can take their existing business and grow it so rapidly? And Mike, you have all those tools. You went for, 2 guys in a truck to, 200 guys in 170 trucks. You know those elements to scale. And if you guys do it, collectively or together, you're going to create a massive wealth machine that, in addition to the cash flow it's spitting off, it's got value you'll be able to harvest and hopefully put away enough money where, you're never going to have to worry about finances again, nor will the next generation or two.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the great game that I'm playing. It's like, how do you optimize, and then, there's so many marketing messages out there. How do you get right? It's not easy. When I get somebody who's best friends, like I just had with this home healthcare company with 100 million payroll, friend of mine, friends with the CEO. He says, "Oh, they're doing an ESOP." I said, "You tell." It was beginning of May. I said, "You tell them to stop right now." It's May 15th. I said, "You give us 2 weeks. I don't care where you are. You don't know our world. Our world is very unique, and it's really easy to leave a massive amount of money on the table."
I agree.
Well, on the first initial 40% deal, it made an additional $21 million going with us versus the other guys, and they just paid them off and they were gone. But if I hadn't had that connection, it's just interesting. It's just my own world. Anyway, so but just a side note, you guys are in a niche that, when you get mass and size, compels extreme values, right? But you need to get there, and they don't want to play. Private equity doesn't want to play at that on that person netting 250, 500 million. They want to play at 5. They're playing at 5 and 10 and above in profits, right?
Yeah, that's
so you
great.
Get 10 of the 500 together. You're gonna create. I'll stand down.
Yeah, Richard, a couple last notes. One, I got to hook up with Morty because he would be great to come and talk, because both of you guys have such unique skill sets. Number 2, me, you, Aaron, my wife, and Morty and my son, we should set up time. I do have events in September. We should meet because there's definitely more collaboration we should be doing. We want our portfolio by 2030 to be doing 500 million, which means there's hundreds of millions of ESOPs in there. So let's make sure we make time in October to hang out. Okay.
And what I would say with Morty is what he's been doing now, which has been wonderful. Like, I have a surgeon with 7 centers in Ohio. I couldn't get him to get me the data. I just couldn't. He's got 7. Morty pulled it all together. He goes through, we say there's 14 must-dos to maximize wealth, but there's really 21. So he sits down and he goes through these businesses. He charges them a certain amount, and he goes through all 21. Now, they still have to execute, but at least they know what they are. If they want help executing, they can execute. I'm sure that can layer into whatever you're doing, Mike.
Yeah.
And it would just add massive value all around. So we'll continue those discussions. And I so appreciate you for spending some time with me today. And, I one other time I got to spend a little time with some of your folks, and thanks to all everyone who's on the line for listening to me rant for the last 45 minutes.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you, Richard. I'll send you one of my famous video messages later. So thanks. Have a